He's a man of a searching and versatile intellect. He is a man who can bridge cultures and understands history and scholarship and politics and theology and philosophy.
My guest this week is an author, a filmmaker, a former policy advisor to Ronald Reagan.
Mr. Dinesh D'Souza.
This American dream is a dream not just of economic opportunity or success, but it's ultimately a dream where you can be the architect of your own destiny.
I grew up in a different world, actually a world without America. And although I grew up without a phone, without television, without hot water, we had a car, but if you looked down the floor of our car, you could see the ground.
He's been described as an influential conservative thinker. He's a best-selling author, political commentator, and filmmaker.
The great man, Dinesh D'Souza, a patriotic man.
No longer would I say that I live in a rarefied world of intellectual debate. I've seen the upside of America, and I've seen the downside of America. But at the end of the day, I wouldn't trade the United States for any other country. At the end of the day, my enthusiasm for American government may have dimmed, but my enthusiasm for this country burns brighter than ever. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I, for one, am very glad we're not living in Hillary's America. And it was close. I mean, you remember right up to the very day of the election, it wasn't just the unified force of the Democratic Party. It wasn't just Republican dissension over Trump. It was also the enormous power of the media. And you remember the media, up to the very last minute, huffing and puffing to drag that crooked hag across the finish line. And their highly constricted, dismayed, constipated faces when that didn't happen. Now, I want to talk about the present and about the future, but I feel it's necessary to start by doing a brief postmortem. When I think about Benghazi, when I listen to the things that have been said here, on the face of it, we have a complete puzzle, which is that we have a government that is charged with its primary duty, protecting us from foreign and domestic thugs. That's what we have government primarily to do. And you have a situation in Benghazi which raises the question, what were these people thinking? Could it be that they were so utterly indifferent to the lives of fellow citizens that they would just let this happen? Could it be that they are actually covert traitors who wanted it to happen? What actually is going on here? Now, it is so tempting because we're Americans, we're people of goodwill, we're tempted to ascribe these things to incompetence, to mere negligence and oversight. But that, I don't think, is what was going on in Benghazi. Now, we've had plenty of incompetence in American politics. We've had plenty of foolishness and idiocy. But I think if one had to award the Presidential Award for nincompoopery, we would have to still, even now, award that to Jimmy Carter. Now, I mention this because, in a sense, we got Islamic radicalism through Carter. Carter pulled the Persian rug out from under the Shah, and whoops, we got Khomeini. Now, no one would say, I wouldn't say, that Carter intended this to happen. Carter was simply an unbelievable boob. And so in trying to get rid of what he saw as the bad guy, we got the worst guy. And this is, of course, one of the cardinal principles of American foreign policy. In getting rid of the bad guy, try to make sure you don't get the worst guy. When Obama first came to office, I recognized quite early on that we are dealing with a completely different breed of character. With Obama, you're not dealing with a nincompoop. And I don't even think you're dealing with a closet Muslim. Obama is simply too secular, too irreligious to be a Muslim. I don't recommend that we send him a prayer rug. He wouldn't know what to do with it. With Obama, you're dealing with somebody we haven't really seen in American politics at that level, and that is someone who actually thinks the United States is a force for evil in the world. This was the whole point of his presidency, the apology tour, all of it. And his foreign policy was designed over 8 years to reduce American power and American influence in the world. That was its intention. That was its result. If you simply look at something like, move away from Benghazi for a moment, the Bergdahl exchange, which to any American, Republican or Democrat, just seems like something utterly appalling. And again, our natural tendency to goodwill says this must have been a colossal blunder. It takes a particular cast of mind to be able to get behind the curtain of Obama and see that for somebody like that, this actually represents, believe it or not, a success. A success. We return 5 Taliban fighters, and we get back 1 anti-American traitor. That is, so think of the habit of mind that computes that as a triumph of American foreign policy, or at least in a small step toward bringing America down a notch in the world. Now, that's Obama. The Clintons are a different matter. I mean, here you're dealing with Bonnie and Clyde. So, these are 2 people who have been on the make and on the take from the early days. These are characters right out of Mark Twain. If you remember the Duke and the Dauphin out of Huckleberry Finn, 2 complete con men. And for the Clintons, I think they found themselves in an unbelievable position to, in a sense, rent out American foreign policy for money. For money. Again, on the face of it, this seems unbelievable. I mean, we've had corruption in American politics, going back to Tammany Hall, the sort of machine politics of New York, continuing with the Daley rackets in Chicago. But never before have we had a Secretary of State, essentially putting American foreign policy up to the highest bidder. And so with Obama and Hillary, we got this sort of confluence of forces. The one guy trying to scale back American influence in the world. On the other side, you've got, you might say, the latest incarnation of the Corleone family, installed in high office. And while we might say who voted for this, we did. Not we didn't, but we let it happen. And once you let it happen, the one area that the president has almost uncontested sway over is foreign policy. And so once Obama came into office, once Obama was reelected into office, terrible things were going to happen from our point of view, although not from his point of view. Now, I'm very happy to say that this extremely destructive operation was brought to a halt on November 8th. I forget who it was who said that God looks out for drunks and the United States of America. But this was really a providential moment in American politics, almost a national reprieve, and accomplished under incredible odds. Incredible odds because even the Republican Party has been gunning for Trump, and still is. And Trump, nevertheless, has come out the gate. Look, I think we all know we are in, let's just call it a high-risk presidency. This guy came out of nowhere. He's extremely out there. I became a conservative in the early 80s. I'm a young Reaganite from those days. Reagan and Trump are quite different. Reagan was a man of priorities. He thought, I can't change the world in 20 ways. I can change it in 2 or 3 ways. I'm going to focus on the Soviet Union. I'm going to focus on Central America, on taxes. That's pretty much it. I'm going to let everything else kind of go. Not Trump. Trump is fighting on every front. I mean, this guy is pulling out of the trade pact, and he's fixing Obamacare, and he's got the tax bill. But in the middle of this, he finds time to swat Meryl Streep and take on Saturday Night Live and the NFL and failing CNN. Trump recognizes the importance of fighting not only the political war, but the culture war. And while Reagan sort of went above the heads of the media, Reagan was above the fray. Trump is 100% in the fray, Now, I don't get these guys like Romney and George W. Bush. We nominated those guys. They were our standard bearers. But the world has actually changed. This is post-Obama, this is post-Hillary, this is post-Benghazi. We're in a completely different kind of fight. And it's the kind of fight, I have to say, I hope many of you will agree, in which there's not a whole bunch of room anymore for what I'm going to call the invertebrate Republican. Now, these invertebrate Republicans are all around us. They're all trying to undermine Trump. At the core of it, what drives them is fear. Fear. Because we'll say things, and over the last few years, people would say to me, Dinesh, what's the deal with the Congress? What's the deal with Boehner? What's the deal with McConnell? Those guys are such unbelievable wimps. Well, the question I ask is, what makes those people wimps? Why do they act in the way that they do? And the answer is, they are terrified of the media. The media has the power to disgrace, to humiliate, to destroy. Now, Trump has this unbelievable ability to survive this attack, stand in the throes of the storm, smile, fire back. Fire back. He's the most dangerous counterpuncher since Reagan. And people say all the time, I mean, these are the Republicans, they go, oh, the problem with Trump is he's always on Twitter. Take away his Twitter. And I'm thinking, and do what? Give it to you? What would you do with it? But the point is that a lot of these other Republicans realize that they can't go through what Trump goes through. They don't know how to fight that kind of fight. And if the media puts them in the sights for 3 months and they are subjected to withering attack, their careers would be so destroyed that their own side would bury them. And so their political movements are very similar to the sort of antelope on the Nature Channel. And that is that you look around hoping that some other antelope will be eaten, so that the spotlight doesn't fall on you. The cheetah's gaze doesn't fall on you. This is the state of the Republican Party right now. When you see, isn't it amazing? We have the House, we have the Senate, we have the presidency, and yet it seems even now that we're on the defensive. It seems even now that these investigations are focused on us. Why aren't we investigating them? What's the deal with our Justice Department? I mean, to tell my own story in a nutshell, I went down to Kenya, kind of puzzled by Obama. I had this intuition that he wasn't this sort of civil rights guy. He wasn't sort of the modern Rosa Parks. And so I go down to Kenya, I go to his family homestead. I'm entertained by his grandmother. Incidentally, Obama has 5 grandmothers. His grandfather was a polygamist. So here I am on the family plantation. I meet with Obama's brother, who lives, by the way, in a sort of hut in the slums of Nairobi. And so I got a window into Obama's world. And truth be told, I ticked him off by making the movie, Obama's America, 2016. Now, on social media, people say, well, gee, Dinesh, what makes you think that Obama pays any attention to you or your silly movie? Well, shortly after the film came out, vituperative attacks on me began to appear on a website called barackobama.com. And so once I stood in a courtroom in New York City and heard the words United States of America versus Dinesh D'Souza, I recognized this is a case where the empire is striking back. In other words, this is a case where this government is going to use the full power of the state against its political opponents. Now, by the way, this is actually the essence of fascism. It's not even those little mama's boy Antifa guys who are crawled out of Bernie's basement, put on their silly outfits, look, they got their bike lock, you know, or their breakfast fork. I mean, those guys are a nuisance, but the real deep state is not Antifa. At Berkeley, the most dangerous man is not Antifa, it's the mayor of Berkeley who's a member of one of the Antifa groups. He's the guy who calls off the cops and unleashes this kind of orgy of violence. I'm much more scared of the Hollywood bosses who have the chance to destroy the career of a young screenwriter, or the academic deans who will ruin a young conservative academic, or a government led by Obama and Hillary who will use the weapons of the state, the FBI, the CIA, the Justice Department, deploy the SWAT teams of the government against their political opponents. They do this. We don't. So right here we have a sort of disproportion between our side and their side. And this, by the way, stretches through all the organs of the government. Even consider the Supreme Court. Right now, the Supreme Court should be overwhelmingly on our side. Out of 9 votes, it should be 6-3, if you simply go by Republican or Democratic nominees. But the problem is, we can't go by that. The other side can count with Euclidean certitude on its votes. 4 votes for sure are in the bag. We can't. How's Anthony Kennedy feeling today? Hey, we got Kennedy. Whoops, we lost Roberts. What this means is that their side, their court nominees are acting as loyal Democrats. And our court nominees are considering every case on the merits. Once again, I'm merely drawing attention to the disproportion of commitment. Social media. If I go on social media, put out a tweet right now, 10 leftists will be on my Twitter feed in seconds, attacking me in every merciless conceivable way. They'll attack what I say, they'll attack what I look like, they'll attack my family, they'll do everything they can to demean me and drive me from public life. Now, we don't do this. If Nancy Pelosi goes on Twitter, we don't have 10 guys who immediately jump on and begin to blast her, humiliate her, make fun of her looks, make fun of her family. I mean, we don't think like this. I mean, I do, but generally, in general, in other words, I guess what I'm saying is we are still fighting the gentleman's fight of the 1980s. That's our politics. This is a little bit why so many Republicans are uncomfortable with Trump, because they feel they want to live in the Reagan era, in which Reagan and Tip O'Neill could have some political squabbles in the day, but then go out for a Guinness in the evening. They didn't actually do that, but it was conceivable they could. There was a certain kind of camaraderie in American politics. And look, whether we like it or not, this camaraderie now is gone. And I say we have to recognize this, begin to recognize the configuration of forces now, and we can make a real difference. Now, Trump, I think, is what we need for the moment. He is our man right now. And quite frankly, I don't think there's another person who could do what he does right now. No. But he's also besieged on his own side. He's besieged even in the White House. And he needs allies. And he needs allies who can get information out. Now, I mentioned the power of the media. It is true that we have been as conservatives, as Republicans, we have been a little bit negligent in letting the other side become so dominant in academia and the media and the whole entertainment industry, which includes Hollywood, but it also includes Broadway and the music industry. Look at comedians. I mean, they've got Bill Maher, Jon Stewart, Colbert, John Oliver, Ellen, Rosie O'Donnell. You go down and down the list. We have almost nothing to compete with that. And a lot of young people get their political ideas, forget about their sense of humor, from these dudes. So we are in a situation where we need to use the weapons at hand. And by the way, one of those weapons is social media. If you're not on social media, you should be. Because it makes you into a mini publisher. It enables you to generate information and share it. People go, well, I only have 20 friends on Facebook. Well, yeah, but they've got 20 friends on Facebook. So there's a multiplying influence that makes you more powerful than you otherwise would be. Lincoln said, America is ruled by public opinion. But he did not mean that America is ruled by the opinions of the public. Amazingly, the opinions of the public only matter every now and then. The American public, the ordinary guy, lives in a fog. He only votes once every 2 or 4 years if it's not raining. But what Lincoln meant is that there is another group of people, a subset of the electorate, that is actually hands-on. And today that would mean the people who are bloggers and the people who are delegates and the people who write their congressmen and the people who are on social media. In other words, the people who actually are informed and the people who actually care. That's us. And what this means is that those of us in this room, a few hundred of us, but nevertheless, we have the chance to make a big impact if we fight tough and if we fight creatively and if we use our influence. Now, most people do not use their influence. They use maybe 5% of the influence that they have. And the reason that they don't do it is, and this is actually part of the scheme of the left, is to keep us cowed and intimidated. Many years ago, a professor of mine told me the story of the lion tamer and the lion. So here's a very interesting sight. You've got this little lion tamer, kind of a weakling, a metrosexual guy, somewhat like Obama. And he's got a little stick. He's sort of twirling it. And there's the big, scary lion following the dictates of the lion tamer. And so my professor now raises an interesting question. Who is actually more powerful, the lion tamer or the lion? Well, obviously it's the lion. But now we have a kind of a mystery. If the lion is more powerful, why is the lion so obediently and sycophantically following the instructions and the lead of the lion tamer? And the answer is that the lion doesn't know its own power. The lion thinks that the lion tamer is more powerful. And that is exactly the condition in which we, the ordinary American citizen, we find ourselves. We're intimidated by leaders, by pundits, by all these guys out there who seem to have all the power. They twirl the stick. We're supposed to follow what they say. But if only we step back, we realize that the power is actually in our hands. And so Trump has at his disposal a lot of the tools to do the things that have been talked about here this afternoon. You want an investigation into Benghazi? Trump can do it. You want to see Hillary Clinton called to account? Trump can do it. Now, Trump is has a funny way of messaging. If you read his Twitter, he'll say things like, Isn't it time for the Justice Department to conduct an investigation? Very odd thing for him to say. He's the president. He appoints the people in the Justice Department. It is completely within his sphere of power to direct them to do things. Why then would he, on Twitter, appear to be signaling to them to do what he can do by picking up the phone? Why would he do that? The answer, I believe, is that Trump is actually calling out to us. Trump is basically saying, I am in a system in which I need outside allies. I'm the outside guy, but I need to have people constantly behind me because when things hit the fan, I actually need to be able to weather that kind of a storm. It's a little bit like when Lincoln left Springfield to come to Washington, D.C. He made a lot of stops. This was when Lincoln was first elected. He was making his way to Washington, D.C. And everyone thought he's stopping because all these crowds would gather to see Lincoln, and he would look them over, and they would look him over. And historians say that basically Lincoln was giving the American people to have a good look at him. But I think something else was going on, the actual opposite. Lincoln was actually trying to have a good look at them, to see if these American people of the 1860s were tough enough to be ready for what was going to come in the next 5 years. In other words, were they up to actually saving the Union? Edmund Burke once said, to love our country should be lovely. I'm an immigrant to the United States. I came at the age of 17. I've seen in my own life the American dream. America is lovely. If you've lived in any other country, if you've even seen other countries, we know this in our bones. And normally in America, you can live the good life without having to worry all that much about politics. It's kind of like saying that when I saw Congressman Yoho showing the Constitution, the blueprint of America, normally you can live in a house without inquiring about the blueprints of a house. You just lie on the couch and walk in the halls. But when the house begins to shake, you might have to go up in the attic and find the blueprints, because something may be fundamentally awry and need to be put back together again. And we are at one of those moments in American history where America has to be put back together again. This is the meaning of Make America Great Again. And the people who have to put it back together, well, many of us are in this room. And so I'm very pleased to be here this afternoon to add my voice to those who cry out about what happened in Benghazi, who look forward not only to an investigation of that, but for an investigation that goes down every little rat hole of the Obama-Hillary administration. Looks under every stone, lifts every scorpion and centipede, and ultimately shines that clear light of truth that is ultimately the basis of justice. This America of ours is not lost. It's not even close to being lost. But some very bad people have done it a great deal of damage, and it is our job starting now to begin the long work of restoration. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.